Hello, my name is Rachel Smith-Steinert, and I am going to discuss India's Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act. Before we discuss the specific act, it is important to understand the Indian government structure. The nation of India is comprised of 29 states and 7 union territories. The government of India is structured very similarly to the United States into a 3-branch system. Legislative power in India is controlled by the Parliament. The 2 houses of Parliament consist of the President of India and the Lok Sabha, members elected by the state and territories. The Parliament's enacted laws are subjected to review by the Supreme Court of India. The executive branch is comprised of the President, the Vice President, and the Prime Minister and his cabinet. The judicial branch consists of the Supreme Court of India, the High Courts of India at the state level, and the district courts and session courts at the district level. Before we discuss the specifics of this act, understanding the background of Indian culture is important. The social, cultural, and religious fiber of India has traditionally been patriarchal in nature, which has contributed to a secondary status for women. Beliefs such as that familial lineage only runs through the male line, that sons are only capable to care for their parents in old age, that men are the only capable breadwinners, and expensive dowry systems are reasons why female offspring have become unfavorable. Marriage is a process where the burden of a woman's father is passed on to her husband for a very high price. The dowry is often so high that generations pay for the debts incurred by marriage. These factors have contributed to a low social status for women to such an extent that the birth of a girl in some families is avoided. Exorbitant dowry demand is one of the main reasons for female infanticide. Traditionally, this was performed by the mother by starving, poisoning, or suffocating her female newborn. Although many would argue that women have not achieved true equality in the United States, women's status in American society is far more equal than in India. In the United States, women have the right to education, land ownership, and freedom to divorce. None of these rights have traditionally been afforded to women in India. Therefore, the birth of a female child in the United States does not carry the same political, social, and financial implications. So the need for this type of act in the United States is not there. In the 1980s, with the rise of amniocentesis, female infanticide was replaced with female feticide, which is the act of killing a female fetus. With increases in education and technology, the rates of female feticide actually continued to soar into the early 1990s. The increase in female feticide led to a decrease in the national female sex ratio in India, which hit an all-time low in the 0 to 6 age group in the early 1990s. Since 1991, 80% of the districts in India have recorded a declining child sex ratio, with the state of Punjab in northern India being the worst. In 1991, there were 947 girls born to 1,000 boys in India. By 2001, the sex ratio had fallen to 927 girls born to 1,000 boy babies born. It is estimated in the late 1990s, more than 100,000 sex-selective abortions of female fetuses were performed annually across the country of India. In the 1860 Indian Penal Code, provisions were included for the punishment of causing miscarriage and other like offenses. However, these offenses were often not prosecuted. With the rise of amniocentesis, the Indian government in 1978 issued a directive banning the misuse of amniocentesis. Sex ratios of female children across India continued to decline into the next century. In the state of Maharashtra, India, after great activist efforts, the Maharashtra Regulation of Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act of 1988 was signed into law. This led to aggressive debate across the Indian country. which led to the Indian Parliament to enact the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act of 1994. This act regulates the use of prenatal diagnostic techniques for the purpose of detecting genetic or metabolic disorders, or for the prevention of misuse of such techniques for the purpose of sex determination for female feticide. Anyone running a diagnostic clinic for sex selection, those who perform the test, anyone who advertises sex selection, those physicians who refer women to a testing center, and the women's relatives can be prosecuted under this law. All clinics that perform amniocentesis must be registered with the state, maintaining meticulous records of each patient encounter with details of each visit. This act was actually signed into law in 1996 with further comprehensive amendments enacted in 2003, which specifically targeted the medical profession. Implementing the act, however, has been left to officials at the state level who work with the Director of Health Services, a member of the women's organization, and an officer of the law. These officials have the power to make investigations into clinics, demand documentation, and seal and seize material from clinics. Courts are then notified by these officials. Penalties under this law include imprisonment for up to 3 years and fines up to 10,000 rupees, which is the equivalent of $160. With subsequent offenses, imprisonment increases to 5 years and 100,000 rupees, which is equivalent of around $1,600. Physician offenders are also reported to the state, which can then lead to license suspensions for physicians. There have been some successes over the past 12 years of the PNDT Act. Today, across India, sex ratios are continuing to improve. In Lakhanpur, a small village in Punjab, which was the state that was shown to have the worst sex ratios in the country, the village recorded 1,400 girl infants born to every 1,000 male infants born in the last census report. In the Hyderabad district in 2004, all 389 diagnostic clinics in the city were audited. 361 of those clinics were cited for non-compliance with PNDT laws. With the successes also come difficulties in the enforcing of the PNDT Act. On March 28, 2008, 12 years after the initial version of the Act was implemented, the first physician was sentenced to 2 years in prison for violating the Act. At this time, 350 cases had been filed as violations under the law. Of these, 226 were for running diagnostic clinics without proper registration, 37 were for communicating the sex of the fetus, and 27 were for advertising sex selection. Today, state officials, to enforce the law, claim they are understaffed, underfunded, undertrained, and overworked, which has led to under-enforcement of the Act. Critics of the government claim a strong lobby from physician groups who continue to profit from sex selection clinics have a strong hold on government enforcing agencies. Sex determination and sex selection has grown into a 1,000 crore, which is equivalent to $244 million industry across India. Many physicians believe they are providing a much-needed service to a population which is poor and overpopulated. And this act has proven to be hard to prosecute because this act takes place behind closed doors, which it's often agreed upon by the pregnant patient, her family, and physician. And many Indians do not find the act of female feticide morally questionable. Although the enforcement of the law has improved sex ratios and criminalizes the act of sex selection, activists argue the only true way for the status of women to improve is to improve cultural mores and the rights of women overall in India. Activists believe that by increasing access to education and empowering women through property rights, sex-selective abortion may actually be eradicated one day in India.